You're listening to the Good Christian Podcast. We're not saying that we're always good Christians, but this is always a good podcast for Christians to listen to. I'm your host, Alex Sanfilippo. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to September. It's also hurricane season here in Florida. We've got one off the coast right now, so we're all really excited about that. But I'm happy to be back with everybody. I'm really excited about today's topic. I'm going to be talking about living a life of faith instead of a life of fear. And this is something that each of us as Christians, we have to choose to live a life of faith, and we have to decide that we're going to overcome fear, and that's what the world has placed on all of us. So I wanted to start off with that, just saying that, hey, this is going to be something we have to choose to do it. You're never going to wake up one day and be like, oh man, I'm full of faith and feeling good. There's always going to be fear. You're always going to have to overcome it. So I wanted to start off this episode by sharing a story from my childhood. When I was a kid, I was visiting Legoland, San Diego, and I was with my family, and I can vividly remember standing in line for this particular ride. It was probably only about 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. I remember my hands sweating, my knees felt weak. There was a voice inside my head that was saying, turn around, Alex, this is not going to be worth it. But something kept me in that line. I think it's probably that my dad and younger brother were in line as well, and they seemed fine, so I needed to play it cool and stick with them. Anyway, I was in line for my first roller coaster. I can remember finally getting strapped in. You start that initial climb. Here's the deal, just be real with you. If there was a button that said stop this ride right now, I would have pressed that button and gotten off of it very quickly. However, here I am already strapped in. I've already made the decision. And as soon as you hit that first drop, if you're like me and someone who now loves roller coasters, you're having the time of your life. I remember being so excited and so animated that moment. I was probably screaming at the top of my lungs. And by the way, I still do that in every roller coaster I get on. But now I love them. Like theme parks, the whole idea of them, it changed my whole dynamic. It was opened a whole new world to me. Because before that, I'd go to theme parks and just be bored. I'd be waiting for my dad to get off of rides. I'm like, I don't want to do that. And I'd just be sitting there. But now I go to these theme parks, I'm psyched. I'm so happy to be there. This is probably the most practical example I can give you about what it looks like to choose faith over fear. I finally decided to stop being fearful. Basically what I was doing that moment, as I was thinking, this thing could crash, I could fall off of it, I could get sick, all these things that could happen, because that's what the world had told me about roller coasters. They're scary, they're fast, they're dangerous, all these different things. But the truth is, they're super fun. And I finally decided just to have faith that, you know what, I'm going to be okay if I go on this and we'll just see what happens. And when I did that, boom, time of my life. So again, that's the most practical example I can give you of choosing faith over fear. And here's the deal. It's a decision that all of us must make. And it's not always as simple as going on a roller coaster. Many times in our life, it's something far, far more intense. Some examples would be choosing the career that you're in. Perhaps you're looking at making a change, but fear has kept you where you are because you're thinking, I'm never going to get another job like this, or I'm never going to be able to get paid this much again, or I'm never even going to find more work that to pay my bills. All these different fears that come into our minds are things that the world has placed there. And perhaps you're saying, okay, no, Alex, I have a good job too. Maybe it's a relationship. Perhaps you're saying that you've been in a relationship for too long that you shouldn't be in, but you're scared because you don't know if you're ever going to find anyone else, or if you're just going to be happier on your own, or not as happy on your own even, and you're just not sure what to do. I mean, that's a whole nother topic there, but seriously, that's something that we all struggle with and deal with. But that's the fear that's inside of us the world has placed in us, which says, again, going back to the relationship example, don't be alone. That's a bad place to be, and we've let that fear take control of our lives. So first off, why do we fear? Why is that what's natural? And there's actually some good reason for that I'm going to get into in a minute here, but we have to first off know that fear is created by what we choose to trust. It isn't reality. So to put that very simply, fear is fake. It's something that we have decided is real because someone has told us it's real, or we've seen it happen in someone else's life, so we just assume it's real. Now, there is some healthy fear. I'm obviously not talking about that in this episode. I'm talking about fear that I consider to be unhealthy and counterproductive to living a life of faith. So before I go any further, let me give you the definition of each of these words. And we have to remember that choosing to live a life of faith versus fear is a really intense battle that's going on in all of our heads, ongoing. This is something that's always going to be there. But it's kind of crazy when you look at the two definitions. So fear, the definition of fear, is an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous or unknown. And then the definition of faith is complete trust or confidence in someone or something that is safe or well-known. So it's basically unknown versus known. And that's the big difference in our minds. When you're full of fear, it's the unknown that you're afraid of. You're just not sure what's going to happen, or someone has told you a negative outcome is going to come from whatever it is that you're going to do. And then faith is saying, no, I know this is going to be okay. This is going to be good. So in order to choose faith over fear, we have to make a decision inside of our minds. And there's actually two things that we have to do to begin growing in our faith. And it's something that, by the way, if you truly are a Christian and someone who wants to live life at the fullest and live it for God, you have to begin living by faith. You have to overcome fear. Fear will cripple you. It'll keep you in the worst spot you can be in for your entire life. And I've seen people go through just years and years of their lives just stuck in a place of fear. And it is so terrible to watch because I know that they're missing out on what God has called them to, which is a happy, joyful, fulfilled life. If you're saying I'm somebody who wants that, these two things I'm about to share with you, I'm going to really challenge you and encourage you to do. So again, in the middle of these two opposites, faith and fear, there are two things that each of us have to do if we want to begin living a life of faith and if we want to grow. Number one, we must trust God. It sounds easy, right? But trusting God is the mental and physical action of choosing faith. That's a whole nother topic, trusting God, and I've got plenty of pieces written on that, articles written on that, so I'll have links in the show notes for that. But here's the deal. We have to first off trust God. If you want to live a life of faith, you have to say, okay, I'm choosing to trust God. And by trusting God, it means understanding his word and knowing that he is going to follow through with what he says. And we're going to get into that a little bit, but basically just saying, all right, God, I trust you. I'm going to have faith in you. I'm going to decide to do what you're telling me to do with my life, or just take the action that I believe is the closest to that and trust that you are going to bless it. So that's a really important thing. However, trusting God isn't always enough. And you're like, oh my gosh, Alex, that's blasphemy. Hear me out. Listen, trust is great and all, but without taking action, trust isn't really anything, right? So you have to learn to confront. That's number two. You have to learn to confront. My favorite definition for the word is actually one of the simplest. To confront simply means to deal with a problem or difficulty face to face or head on. So it's actually looking at the problem, the struggle. So again, choose to trust God, but then the actual physical, practical application of this is looking what you're afraid of and going after it head on. So being willing to confront that which you fear is how you begin to grow your faith. The worst thing you can do is avoid the problem. So when you see something that you're afraid of, you just avoid it and get out of the difficult situation. Here's the deal. If you really want to be trusting God, it means you're going to go after that thing. When you firmly know something, you're not afraid to go after it. So when you're looking at what you feel that God is calling you to do with your life and you're trying to overcome that fear, you trust God and then you go after it. You just run head on, attack it, go for it. I believe that God is going to actually really be there and fill in the gap. So if you're like, I don't know if I can do this, God's going to be there to pick you up and take you even further. I've always known this to be true in my life. So what you do not confront will not change. What you do not confront will not change. I want to ask you this question. I really want you to answer it for yourself. What areas of your life are you having trouble giving to God through faith? And I want to challenge you this. It's time for you to have that childlike faith that caused me to finally get on the roller coaster as a kid so you can begin experiencing the life that God has for you. There's more excitement for you. There's more joy for you. God has more for you than you are in right now. You just have to learn to let go of that fear that's holding you back. And when you do that, you're going to begin experiencing a new freedom, a new area of your relationship with God that you've never even experienced before, more joy than you could possibly imagine. I know that, again, this has always been so true for my life. The times I can finally get over fear to do something the world tells me, Alex, don't do that. It's a bad idea. It's dangerous. It's not safe. It's going to hurt you. When I finally step through that and say, you know what, God, I trust you, and then I just go for it. I take the physical action necessary to overcome that fear. God has pulled through every single time, 100% of the time. Now, I'm not saying I've never had a bad time in my life because that's happened to all of us, right? But at the end of the day, when you make the right decision to have faith in God, long term, it's always going to play out in your favor, and God is always going to be there for you. I want to quickly share a Bible verse that really stood out to me about this in 2 Timothy 1, verse 7. For God gave us a spirit, not of fear, but of power, love, and self-control. That's so good. I love that, man. God did not give us a spirit of fear, which means if you're operating in fear, you're operating contrary to what God has blessed you with. And that's when we have to trust him. We have to have that faith. We have a spirit of power, love, and self-control. So here's the deal. I want to be praying for all of you guys this month, actually. I'm going to be spending time praying for the entire listener base of Good Christian Podcast and also dailyps.com. I'm really going to spend time doing that because I believe that God needs more Christians to start living in faith instead by fear, because so many people in the area of Christianity right now have been crippled by fear. And I think it's time for us to start living at the potential God has called us to. Because if we're not living life at the fullest, which is a life full of trust and faith in God, then we're missing out on so many things he has for us and on the impact that we can have on the world. So I'm really going to be spending a lot of time praying for you in particular and the entire listener base, because that's just so important. I believe that prayer moves mountains, as you guys know, so I'm believing for some things to really change in people's lives. So before closing out this episode, I have 5 things I want to challenge you with. Number 1, forget what someone has told you in the past. Forget what someone has told you to fear in the past. What have they told you that is holding you back? Forget whatever that is. Number 2, embrace the unknown. Whether it's something you've never seen in your life, never done in your life, whatever it is, embrace it and go for it. Number 3, trust that God is going to protect you and take care of you and bless you. Trust that God's going to do what his word has always told us that he's going to do. And again, he's never let me down once. Just trust that God is going to protect you, take care of you, and bless you. Number 3, confront your fears. The things that are holding you back, that you know are holding you back, when you sit back and think about it, overcome them. No longer let them keep you at bay and where you are. And number 5, the last thing here, is remember that God has your best interest in mind. Be excited about overcoming fear. It's so simple that I think many of us forget, myself included. God has our best interest in mind. He wants us to succeed in life. He wants us to overcome what we fear. He wants us to live this life at the fullest that he has called each of us to. And sometimes we just forget that God is on our side. He's there with us. So I encourage you, let go of that fear and go after this faith and this bolder life that all of us can live. And I believe you're going to begin seeing some excellent results in your life. So that's it for me this month. I know you're like, wow, Alex, short episode for you. I know, it was a little bit shorter than my normal. However, I believe it was just action-packed, right? There's so much in this episode. I encourage you to go back and listen to it again and really think about this, because this is not a topic we can ignore. We have to begin living a life of faith and at a greater level. I believe all of us have some faith in our life, but we've also got some level of fear. And I don't know what your fear is in your life. I don't know what's holding you back. Only you can really know that. It's going to require you to sit down and really think about it. But when you do, begin replacing that fear with faith in God. And I promise you, your life is going to continue to excel and grow. And I'm excited to see what happens to everybody, for myself included, because I have things I fear in my life that I know that I need to surrender to God and begin living in faith and attacking those things head on. So I'm excited about that. And as always, thank you so much for listening, everybody. I love all of you. I'm so excited about this podcast. It's one of the things I look forward to doing every single month. So I'm glad you continue to listen and continue to share this with everybody, because it's really been impacting and reaching a lot of people. I'm getting great feedback from it. So love you all. Looking forward to being back with you next month. Thank you again for listening to the Good Christian Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a review. This really helps us to continue to impact and reach more people. I'm looking forward to sharing another episode with you next month. Until then, if you want to overcome fear in your life, you must choose to walk by faith.